Hi, everyone. My name is Marisa, and I'm a wildlife ecologist in Maine. And right now, I'm studying a critter that starts to move in the spring. So that's why I look forward to spring, is that I get to see these animals come up from under the earth where they've been spending the winter, just like we've been spending the winter in our houses, nice and cozy. Unless you hopefully get out there and ski and skate and everything. Um, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got to be what I'm doing, and some of the things that I study and some of the data that I collect. So, long, long time ago, before you were born, I think, I used to be a teacher in a classroom and I taught students English as a second language. So, I was living in South Korea for a few years and I worked in an elementary school. And then I moved to Spain for a few years. And I also worked in elementary school there. But I love teaching and being with students. But what I was really daydreaming about all the time was being outside and looking at wildlife and getting to know wildlife and what they were up to. And I'd spent a lot of my life observing wildlife, but not really knowing that much about it. And I decided when I moved back to the United States that I was going to get a job outside, and that maybe that would get me closer to the natural resources and the environment and the things that really inspired me. So I became a park ranger, and I started working. Actually, I did start working at a volcano, and I learned a lot of geology. And I didn't really know any geology before, but I really started to read everything that I could. And this volcano is called Mount St. Helens, and it's in Washington State. And I talked to visitors about how it erupted over 40 years ago and the consequences of that eruption on the plants and the animals in the area. And you can still see those effects today, like in this photo on the left, all those flowers you see, it's so beautiful. Well, they wouldn't have been there if that volcano hadn't exploded really and blown down all of the trees and changed the landscape dramatically. It also had a great impact on wildlife. And so I became really interested again in wildlife. This volcanic eruption, like I said, it had knocked down all of the forests in a really big area. And that actually at first was not a great thing for a lot of wildlife. Some of it, perished in that volcanic eruption. But in the end, it all came back and more than ever because it had sort of created these new environments and mountain goats came in and bulls and elk and bear and everything. So I was really interested in that story and telling the stories of ecosystems. So this sort of greater landscape story of wildlife and the plants and how that all comes together to create these environments that we love. And I moved to a few different places to work. I worked in California in the mountains and did get to work with some newts up there. But I taught students about the giant sequoia trees and the mountains that they have over there. And I moved to the desert and I taught people about rattlesnakes and geology in the canyons and the sandstone of the desert. But, I really loved talking about the natural resources, but I really wanted to know more. So I decided I wanted to be the one who is actually collecting the data so I could tell even a better story. So I could really, really, really know what I was talking about. So I decided I would become a scientist. And I didn't want to be a scientist that worked inside in a lab. That was not the point, right? I wanted to be a scientist that worked outside. So that is what I started to do. And I started taking a bunch of different jobs. Like this one you can see in the photo, I joined a couple other coworkers and we would hike up into the mountains in California and we'd go to these beautiful lakes and we'd collect water to bring it back to the lab. And then we could determine things like what sort of nutrients were in the water. what was the water quality? We take temperature readings. We bring up a big scientific instrument and put it in the water. And from this, we could see how things are changing over time. I also like to work with fish. So I went back to Oregon where I was from and I worked with salmon, different, slightly different salmon than we have here. We have more Pacific kinds of salmon. And as you can see in this trap that I'm working in, we're trapping little fish to do a study to see just how many are living in the river before they swim back out to the sea. And then I moved again. I moved to the desert in the Mojave Desert, which is Southern California and Nevada, and it includes places like um, Joshua Tree National Park and Death Valley. So some of the hottest places on the planet and in our country, and some of the driest places. But believe it or not, I worked with water there. So I went to these little aquatic ecosystems. And on the left, you can see I'm actually studying the insects that live in the water there. And when I was a kid, I loved playing with insects. So this was like a dream come true job. And on the right, you can see that's a coworker of mine, and we're actually hiking through the desert to look for a desert spring. So the desert might seem vast, but there's water out there. You just kind of have to see it. So we'd also take measurements of water and see was it changing over time, the characteristics of the water. And I did a lot of different things because I like to learn lots of different things. And I did some more sampling in the water here on the left. I love birds, so I did some bird banding in the desert as well. And then on the bottom right corner, that's actually in the desert, but it snows in the desert. So I was working on measuring some trees, different sort of forest, obviously, than we have here in Maine. But then I decided that I wanted to go back to school. So I wanted to get a master's degree in science, and I decided to come to Maine. And so that program's at the University of Maine in Orono. And what I loved about moving to Maine was that this work that I was hired to do was going to be looking at amphibians in a national park, and that is Acadia National Park, so I talked about. And my question that I was hired to find the answers for is where and when do amphibians cross the road? And on the right, you can see this beautiful Acadia National Park. But I guess a challenge with the park is that there are a lot of people who visit it, and most people drive in their cars. So if you're an amphibian crossing the road, that's kind of a big deal, and it's quite dangerous for you. Oh, what are amphibians? Hmm. Well, you'll probably look at this frog and know, oh, that's a frog. But what makes it actually an amphibian? Well, amphi means both. So most amphibians need both water and land to complete their life cycle. So, what that means is that to complete their life cycle, it's not just eating and living, but they also have to reproduce and make tadpoles or larvae. And in order to do that, they have to go to maybe a body of water, like a pond, sometimes like a ditch full of water. That doesn't have to be a lot of water. Or maybe they live in a really big wetland. So a lot of variety. Every species of amphibian is different. And they're not just frogs and toads. A toad is a kind of frog. These are both and frogs and toads that live in Maine. On the left is a Western or American toad, sorry. And on the right is a common frog. It's called a pickerel frog. And here are a few more. And one reason that it's difficult to be a frog on a road is that, uh, or dangerous rather, is that they don't really realize that a car is coming like we do. Like we can sense there's a sound, and or maybe we see the headlight lights, or maybe we even feel a vibration. And these frogs don't really react like we would, or maybe some other animal would, to an oncoming car. So they might just stay in the middle of the road. There's also salamanders and newts. So frogs and toads are not the only amphibians. Salamanders and newts are also, and they also need some water, and but they spend most of their life on land. So on the left, there's a newt. It's eastern newt. You might hear the word red eft. And on the right is a four-toed salamander. It's really, really small. And you might only see these at night. Otherwise, they're underground, and you might even have no idea that they're right below your feet. But there's so many of them that I think you'd be really surprised. So why are amphibians on roads? Hmm, interesting question, I think. Well, if you've ever been out on a rainy night or day, you might have seen a lot of earthworms come out of the ground and onto the sidewalk or the street. So this wet road actually attracts other things, other invertebrates like spiders and slugs and worms and moths. And most amphibians are, I guess, carnivorous, and they eat a lot of basically whatever they can fit into their mouths. So they might be on the road to actually forage for those other little critters that are attracted to the road. It's kind of like a buffet. Also, the warmest road. Have you ever noticed, like in the summer, the blacktop gets really, really hot, and so maybe you can't go barefoot. So it even happens in the winter or early spring when right now it's maybe still snowing outside of my window today, but the sun heats up that warm, that dark road, and the frogs, since they're cold-blooded, they need another source of heat in order to stay warm. So they might actually go to that road to heat their bodies up and make it through the night. And they need to get to habitat. So the habitat is this place that has all of the things that they require. So maybe that's food or shelter. And this habitat that they're trying to get to might be a place that has a bunch of food they can eat. So maybe it's into the forest, or it might be to a body of water where they have to go breed and make other tadpoles, and they have to meet other species like another salamander, another frog. And so, in order to do that, they might have to cross a road and they might have to go back and forth over this road. And I think I mentioned before, so roads are dangerous because they don't really react to the car. So, we actually see a lot of dead amphibians on the roads during these busy nights when they migrate in the spring. They've just woken up from the winter and they're ready to go about doing their salamander or their frog thing. But we can't really see them very well when we're driving, and it's hard for us to not hit them. And if enough amphibians die or get hit by cars, then maybe their little population of spotted salamanders, like this one you see here, maybe it won't exist in that place anymore. So we're really concerned about that. I just wanted to show you a photo of sometimes how slowly amphibians will cross the road. And so during this whole time on this road, this little red eft is, oh, he's just so vulnerable, waiting for a car to come by. So we just hope that he makes it across. And he's almost there. Oh, he's still going. And so this is sort of what I get to study. I go out on roads at night and I look at slow little newts crossing the road. And I give them a little lift across, but then I collect some data as well. Okay, I think that's enough. And so here's some of the species that I see. This one you're probably really familiar with on the left, spotted salamander. These adults are quite big, but they come in all different sizes because there's all different ages. So there might be some that are just an inch or two big and they're so cute, but maybe they're just really young and they've just grown up into a little salamander and they're just trying to get back into the forest. Or this one in the middle is a little green frog, and these frogs can get quite big, but of course the little ones, um, they're younger, maybe it's a year old, and uh, I try to look at what's the sizes of all these. And on the right, it's a redback salamander, which again is a very common salamander that you might never see But the next time you're in the woods and maybe you look under a log, you might see one of these salamanders. So what's the data I collect? Well, I look at the amphibian and I say, what species is it? There are 18 species of amphibians in Maine. And in Acadia National Park, there are 13. So I have to know 13 different species. And I want to know how big is it? Because how big it is tells me maybe if it's an adult or if it's a juvenile, so it's sort of like teenage age, or if it's just a little baby and it's just emerged from its pond. And then I note how many are there. If it's just one, maybe it's not a place where a lot of amphibians cross the road. But if there's 10, well, maybe this is a really important place and we should protect it. And maybe we should build a tunnel or something, or we should close the road at certain times of year, or maybe at night. So just to keep cars from crossing there. Well, there's something about that place and the environment that makes it really enticing for amphibians to cross just right there. And I also note, is it alive or dead? And unfortunately, I do see a lot of dead amphibians, and they're dying because they're getting hit by cars. And that might also be important to see, well, if a lot of the amphibians that I'm seeing here are dead, maybe this is a spot that we should pay special attention to and we should protect it. And I also collect some other data because this is going to tell me more about the time of the year or day that really makes it a good time for amphibians to be on roads. Well, a bad time for them to be on roads, but it's the reasons why they're there. So, what's the temperature? Like I said, amphibians are cold-blooded, so they don't make their own heat like we do. Like when you run a fever, you're creating all of that heat's coming out of the food you ate that day is sort of like making your body warm. But with an amphibian or a reptile like a snake, they don't make their own heat, so they have to wait for the environment to warm them. So that might be the sun, or it might be a warm rock that they go and lay on, like a snake might do that. And so that's important to know because if it's too cold, there's not going to be amphibians out. We want to know what's the temperature that amphibians really, really like, and they're going to be on the road. And is it raining? So amphibians have this really like delicate, sort of like porous skin. And you might have heard that amphibians breathe through their skin, which is sort of correct. And there are some salamanders, they're called lungless salamanders, and they don't have any lungs, so they do sort of breathe through their skin. But it's more of a skin that needs to be moist all the time. And if it's not moist, then they'll dry up and they'll die. So if they're gonna move, maybe during the year they're underground and it's nice and moist in there and they're fine, or they're under a pile of moist leaves in the forest and they have to wait until it rains so they can cross the road. And how much rain? If it's just a little rain, maybe that's not enough for them. But if it's been raining all day, and they can tell, then they might be understanding that, oh, this is really a good time for me to move across the road to get to this pool. And how many days since it last rained? Imagine you are waiting inside for, well, I guess maybe in our case it would be for the rain to stop. So it's been raining every day, and you're waiting for that one sunny day that's perfect. And the more time goes by, it's been raining for 30 days straight. You go out on the next day, it doesn't rain. It doesn't matter what the weather. You just want to go outside. So it's kind of like the reverse thinking with amphibian. If it's been dry and sunny and hot and dry and sunny and hot and you can't move, that first time it's wet, you want to go out and cross the road. So it's sort of building that anticipation of rain. So that's something I look at. And what time is it? Is it late at night, early in the morning? And that might tell us more about when amphibian wants to move based on daylight. And most of them move at night. And what is the date? it's going to be different movement if it's early spring rather than like midsummer or late fall. And I can't just go out in one night and say I know everything about their movements. I have to do this all year because I need to see some evidence. I need to collect data um, on the different variables, the environment, the time, and the temperature, and what species are crossing. So I can try to say, oh, there's a pattern here, and we can try to do something for the road to make it that uh, the amphibians don't get hit by cars. Yeah. So that is all I have for you, but I hope you have lots of questions about amphibians, and I'm happy to talk about them with you for the next, 25 minutes or so.
Great.
And
Thank you so much.
unshare, Zoe?
Sorry, what was that?
Should I unshare my screen or just leave it here?
Yeah, up to you.
Okay, I'll just leave it here. You can look at this northern dusky salamander.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
So anyone that has any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat and I will read them out to Marisa. In the meantime, I have a question while folks are kind of loading those in. What's something that you're really excited about in your field of study?
Hmm. I'm really excited to see how we can, us humans, can actually come together and do something for amphibians. Because I think a lot of us humans, we really love and appreciate amphibians, and we don't want them to die because we're driving cars. And so I've noticed, I work with a lot of volunteers and young people that we all have a common goal to do something about this. So I'm really excited to see how we change our communities to protect amphibians.
Me too. I love to protect amphibians. Okay. So we have a few questions from, it seems like we have some individual students in here as well. Um, and then we have some from classrooms. But one of the questions, let's see, from um, from Barbara is what's the largest amphibian?
In the world, I actually don't know. There are in Japan, I know there's a giant salamander, and I think it's critically endangered, and I believe it's quite large. I don't know exactly, but in Maine, it would probably be the bullfrog, and bullfrogs are really, really big. When at their biggest size, and they're so big that they'll eat, whatever they can get in their mouths, and they'll eat things like birds. They'll eat other frogs. They'll eat fish. So that I think that's our largest amphibian. But I would love to go to Japan and see a giant salamander.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. I didn't know that they could eat birds. That's
Oh
crazy.
yeah.
That's so crazy. Okay, Emily asked, how many animal species have you found? Maybe, or how many have you researched,
Mm.
years of research? And then which
Oh,
is your favorite?
I don't know how many species because, things like birds, there's so many species. So maybe like kinds of animals. I've worked with a lot of amphibians and some birds, but a lot of invertebrates. So the insects that I was talking about, I really, really like those too. And once I went out on a hike looking for mountain goats, and that was really cool. But I think my favorite is probably amphibians. And I know it's a really big group, but when I look for amphibians at night, it's kind of like going to the bottom of the ocean or like going to the moon because it's like this whole world of animals that we don't usually get to see unless we're out at night looking for them. So they've really opened up this whole world of wildlife for me.
Very cool. Um, Similar to one of the previous questions, what's the smallest amphibian, maybe in the world or here?
I don't know the smallest in the world, but I can imagine that is quite small, either probably like a tiny little frog. And there's a lot of amphibians that probably haven't been discovered yet. Um, And here, I believe our smallest salamander is I think it's the four-toed or it's the two-lined, and they're quite small. But of course, when you find them when they're really a baby, you know, they're all of these amphibians can be really, really small. Like a toad can be like this big. Um, or you might think of our smallest little frog as our spring peeper, and they're about this big, so they're pretty cute.
Okay. Um, Charlie asked, do you only work on one spot on the road or
Hmm,
different sites?
that's a really great question. I can't believe I didn't mention that. No, actually, I last year I had 16 different spots. And I had a lot of volunteers, including Zoe, helped me at least one night, I think, because I can't be everywhere at once. And so I really relied on the community members to help me look for amphibians. So 16 places last year. And then I also will drive around all the roads and, well, we'll drive really slow and walk the roads and look everywhere.
Um, Brody asked, what's the hardest part of your job?
Oh my gosh, I know this right away is that staying up late at night is hard for me. I really like going to bed early, and that's why I like studying birds. Um, so I can wake up early in the morning and watch the sunrise. But so for me, it's just staying up late at night when it's raining and cold. But it's still a lot of fun, so it's okay.
One of the other questions is, do amphibians have different colors depending on where they live?
Oh, that's a great question, and they do. Yeah, a lot of amphibians will have quite a big range. So, like the toad here in North America or the eastern side of North America, there's different colorations up in Canada for versus down here, or maybe in a certain area, just like a smaller area, there'll be a different variety. Or the redback salamander, a lot of them don't have red backs. They'll be like a lead morph, which is sort of like a slatey gray, dark, or they'll be bright, bright, bright orange all over their body. So, and that's really common for the amphibian world to have a lot of variation in colors.
Very cool. Kind of more about just the life of a amphibian. How old can salamanders get?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, there's a lot of species of salamanders, but I'm just going to tell you about the spotted salamander. It can live 15 to 20 years. It's a long time.
That's a lot longer than I would have thought. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah.
Um, okay. There's a question about, oh, here it is. What classes in high school did you take to help with your science backgrounds?
Hmm. Well, I was interested in a lot of different things. My school didn't offer that many science classes, so I took biology and I took environmental science and chemistry. Sort of like the normal classes, nothing too specialized. It's when you go to college, you get to take all of the fun wildlife classes. Yeah, but you do need those basics in order to build up to those classes.
There's another question asking about why you moved to so many different locations when you were doing different studies. And then if you have a favorite one to see amphibians.
Oh, to see amphibians. Oh, I moved a lot because I always really wanted to travel, and that's just my personality. Um, and so that was something that I wanted to do. I like learning languages and meeting lots of new people. And then when I came back, a lot of wildlife biologists, they do move around a lot because um, you kind of can't. Well, first of all, we like to learn a lot of different things, and that requires kind of moving around. Um, you kind of have to go where the animal is. So, uh, if there's a job studying salamanders, you kind of have to go where the salamanders are. Um, and then my favorite place to study amphibians is here because there's more amphibians here in Maine than when I was living in the desert, for example. So it's much easier to see them here.
Thanks. There's another question. How can a lack of amphibians affect our habitat?
Oh, that's such a great question. Yeah. So, I talked a lot about how many amphibians are, for example, in the forest, just the forest. There are just millions, and salamanders are even the most abundant vertebrate species in the forest. You just can't see them. And think about all of those little mouths just like eating invertebrates or crunching through the forest, right? And so they're cycling these nutrients or this energy through the ecosystem. And so they're taking these tiny little things that you might not even be able to see with our own eyes, eating them and then turning them into their own body. And so they become prey for bigger animals and bigger animals. So they're really just a lot of something else to eat too. But also they really relate to like the decomposing of our leaves and the building of our soil, things that are really important for the health of a forest or a wetland and things like that. So without them, you'd be really missing a crucial part of cycling all of those nutrients through the system and providing food for other animals.
It could have a big impact. Very cool. Um, okay, a clarifying question. Why is a turtle not considered an amphibian?
Oh, that's it's a great question. So a turtle and like snakes, they really evolved a long, 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 long time ago. They sort of branched out, just like mammals kind of branched out from, um, reptiles or whatever, our last ancestor a long, long time ago. Um, so they have a lot of similar characteristics, like being cold-blooded, but they're really not very related. And if you think about how their body is, they're much more like have like thick skin, or like a turtle, they have a carapace or a shell that's part of their body. And so I don't know too much of how like the innards of a turtle work, but their whole basic sort of like being and how their body functions is quite different from an amphibian. Even just look at their skin, right? This salamander in front of us, it just has to be moist. It's like it's just even breathing in a different way than, say, a turtle would. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it's we have so many different categories for animals, and sometimes it can be really confusing. Amphibians and reptiles are a tough one.
Yeah, it's confusing because if you've ever heard the word herpetology or herpetologist, that's somebody who studies both amphibians and reptiles. Although most herpetologists either study one amphibian or the other reptiles, but it's been lumped together just because there's this perception that they are the sort of the same sort of creature, but they have these lots of differences that really can't be combined together.
We should make a new word for it, I think.
Amphibiologist.
Yeah. Um, okay, there was another one. Oh, I just lost it. Um, why are amphibians attracted to the road when it rains? Like, why does that have something to do with it?
Mm. Well, they can't really move a lot when it's dry. Sometimes they can if it's really humid out, in the summer when it gets really, really sticky. Um, so when it rains, it gives them an opportunity to go into the road, but it's also so maybe they have to go somewhere and they have to cross it, and so it's just in the way. Or like all of these other things are attracted to the road. And I don't really know why, like a slug, for example. I don't think a slug can really move when it's super dry either, right? And a worm. Um, and I don't know why the spiders and the moths, but they all sort of go to the road. And when it's wet, just means it's a time that amphibian is capable of going. Otherwise, it might dry up and die.
Um, Very cool. Yeah. So then kind of related to it, we have a question about Big Night. And is Big Night around the same time every year?
Oh, so that is what sort of very related to the question that I'm trying to answer. Is like, why is Big Night this date, maybe April 1st one year, and then maybe April 15th the next? And can we sort of predict that? So it's around the same time, but it's not going to be the same day every year. So right now, if you volunteer for Maine Big Night, we're always just watching the weather because it has to be warm enough that it's warm enough for the amphibian who's cold-blooded to move around, and also wet enough, and also the right time of year, and the ground has to be thawed and ice free. And so all these different factors go into it. So this year was we had a really cold, deep winter, and that really froze the ground really thickly, right? And then last year it was really mild and warm. And so it seemed, at least to me, it was very easy to predict when these amphibians were moving. And this year it has not been very easy to predict. So every year is different.
Think I was always told that it's the first rainy night that's warmer than 32 degrees, but ideally warmer than that.
Yeah, and I heard warmer than 42 degrees. But I think just like humans and wildlife, there's all this variability. We don't all like to do the same thing at the same time, the same way. And that's true with all sorts of wildlife. You can't say they're definitely going to do this. So that's what the part of the fun of studying wildlife is trying to solve that problem. What are they going to do now?
Um, Emily asked, where is or what is the most common, most popular salamander, and where could you find it?
Well, here in Maine in the Northeast, it's definitely the spotted salamander. Everyone loves the spotted salamander. They're really big, and when they walk, I think they look like puppy dogs. They're just like strolling across the road. And those bright yellow spots are so beautiful. But if you want to see one, you're going to have to be out at night in the rain on the right time. So maybe about now. And because they live under the ground, another name for their kind of salamander is actually mole salamander, is because they just burrow really deep into the ground, under tree roots, and there's a lot of cavities in the soil, so that you will rarely see them out just walking around in the daylight. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of going log rolling in the summertime too. Like if you
Oh
look
yeah,
for kind of an old log with some damp ground underneath, sometimes you can luck out and find some salamanders.
yeah, yeah. So if you like go with your family or your teacher and walk around the woods, maybe you can gently look through leaf litter or under logs, and
Mhm.
then you always just put that stuff back. But that's a good way to find redback salamanders as well. I found one yesterday by doing the same thing, so
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I always make sure that I have my salamander hands, as I call it, where I'll put mud on my hands to make sure that I don't touch them with the oils of my hands.
Yeah, so it's a good idea to have clean hands. You don't want to have sunscreen on your hands, and moist hands. But other than that, yeah, you just be delicate with them. Especially the salamanders can lose their tails, so it's best to just look at them and not pick them up unless you're trying to help one cross the road.
There was a question about any like strange genetic sort of amphibians that you've seen. Like, have you ever seen a frog with three legs? Was the example question. Anything kind of funky.
The weirdest things I've seen, I think, are just different weird colorations that I think are really cool, but nothing crazy like that. Yeah, no three eyes and
Yeah, that would be kind of crazy. Um, what do salamanders eat mostly?
Mm. So salamanders mostly eat invertebrates, and that's just, anything without a backbone. So it could be a tiny little mite or larvae, like a bug larvae, an insect, um, probably a lot of things that are living in the soil. So it's not really, unless maybe it goes out into the road at night when it's wet, like hunting, but probably just like going through the soil. And if you did go out in the woods and you looked in one of those decaying logs, you'd also find a lot of invertebrate animals. Just things crawling around, also laying their eggs and things like that. So um, small things, but the larger the amphibian gets, the larger its mouth gets. It can start to eat bigger and bigger things. Like so, basically anything. They're not really specialists. Like they're not an animal that just eats one thing, right? It's sort of like any invertebrate. And if I don't know if a salamander, I think that salamanders might eat other salamanders sometimes, but I'm not sure. So maybe some vertebrates, but mostly invertebrates.
Cool. We had a few questions about if you've ever seen some frogs that definitely don't live in Maine. So I'm
Mhm.
not sure if you've seen some like more tropical species of frogs. I think specifically they said the poison dart frog or a ground or
No.
it's like really
And
popular tropical that we've seen online.
no, I would love to, and I would love to go to another country one time and learn from other herpetologists in other countries to see what they're studying. Especially because there's so much diversity, and it's thought that probably we are losing species to extinction before we even discover them, and that's happening in the tropics and in the rainforest and things like that. So that's a great question, but not my specialty.
Not yet. Okay, and then I think I'll just do one final question, which is what inspired you to do your job, and then maybe what continues to inspire you to stay in this field?
Oh gosh. What inspires me is that um, I think it's best for me to do something that protects something that I love. So all of these different jobs have rarely felt like work. It's really trying to understand these ecosystems or the species that I love, we all love, and we value, um, and trying to keep them around because I can't really imagine a world that I'd want to live in that doesn't have um, the sound of spring peepers in the spring or the sound of birds. So, yeah, keeping a world that is really pleasant to live in for all of us. And what inspires me to keep working now is I think working and meeting other people in my community that also love these things. And that is a really good way to remind ourselves that even when we're faced with a lot of environmental problems, that we're all sort of sharing the problem together and we're all working together towards a solution. So as long as we're being supportive of each other, it's pretty easy to keep on going.
Well, thank you so much, Marisa.